The storm tore through the valley with a fury that could break bones and freeze the soul. Wind screamed through the trees, driving the snow into sharp, blinding sheets. Eli Thompson leaned forward on his horse, coat pulled tight, his face raw from the cold. He hadn't meant to ride this far from the ranch, but when he saw the cattle tracks vanish into the storm, instinct took over. He was a man who kept his word, even to the beasts that depended on him. But as the hours dragged on and the snow deepened, he began to realize this storm wasn't one he could outlast. He was just about to turn back when something strange caught his eye. A dark shape, half buried near a fallen pine. At first, he thought it might be one of his steers frozen in the drift. But as he rode closer, he saw it move, just slightly. His breath caught. Two figures, small and still, huddled together beneath the snow. He jumped from his saddle, stumbling through the drifts until he was on his knees beside them. Two girls, no, women, young, maybe in their early 20s, their skin dark, their hair black as midnight. Apache. For a long moment, Eli just stared, unsure what to do. The memories of the wars flickered through his mind, the burned wagons, the raids, the blood. But the sight before him wasn't an enemy. It was survival itself. One woman's arm was wrapped around the other, as if even in the cold she'd tried to protect her. Eli touched her shoulder. She didn't move. Then slowly the other opened her eyes. They were clouded with pain, but alive. She tried to speak, but the words came out in a hoarse whisper swallowed by the wind. He didn't need to understand. "Hold on," he said softly, though she likely couldn't hear him. He tore off his gloves and brushed snow from their faces. Their lips were blue, their breaths faint. He didn't think, he just acted. Eli grabbed his rope, looped it around the pine branch that had trapped them, and pulled with every ounce of strength left in him. The wood cracked, the snow shifted, and with a final heave, he freed them both. He carried one in each arm, staggering back to his horse as the wind howled like a beast. Somehow, he lifted them onto the saddle, climbed up behind, and turned toward home. By the time he reached the cabin, the storm was at its worst. Snow battered the windows, and the world outside had vanished into white. Eli kicked open the door, nearly collapsing inside. He laid the sisters by the fire, stripping off their wet blankets and wrapping them in his spare quilts. His hands shook as he built the fire higher, tossing on log after log until the small room glowed with light. He boiled snow in a pot, mixed it with the last of his sugar, and pressed the cup to the elder sister's lips. She didn't drink, but the younger one stirred, a soft, fragile sound that reminded him of wind through dry grass. Eli sat beside them through the night, adding wood to the fire, checking their breathing, wiping frost from their skin. He spoke to them even though they couldn't understand, told them about the storm, the cattle, how the world outside had turned to ice. He didn't know why he spoke, maybe because he hadn't had anyone to talk to in years. Maybe because hearing his own voice made him feel less alone. When exhaustion finally took him, he slept sitting up, his head resting on the wall, the firelight flickering over his face. At dawn, the storm began to ease. Light spilled across the floorboards, soft and golden, like a mercy after the night. Eli woke to a sound, a faint breath that didn't belong to the wind. He turned and saw the older sister's eyes open, dark and clear. She tried to sit, but pain stopped her. He was beside her in an instant, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "Easy," he said. "You're safe." For a moment she only looked at him, the kind of look that saw more than words could carry. Then her gaze shifted toward her sister, still asleep, still pale, but breathing steady now. Relief crossed her face, and tears welled up, catching the morning light. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and took his hand. "You save us," she whispered, her English broken but heavy with feeling. Eli swallowed hard, unsure what to say. He'd seen men die in snow, horses collapse in their tracks, cattle freeze standing where they stood, but he'd never seen a sight like this. Two lives pulled back from the edge of death. He squeezed her hand gently and nodded once. "Rest now," he said. "You're safe here." As the fire cracked softly, Eli looked between the two women and felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was purpose. The storm outside had finally broken, but inside the cabin, another kind of warmth had begun to grow. He didn't know who they were or why fate had thrown them into his path. But one thing was certain. He wasn't alone anymore, and though he didn't realize it yet, those two women would change everything, the rhythm of his days, the quiet of his nights, and the lonely way he'd come to understand the world. For the first time in years, as the firelight touched his worn hands, Eli Thompson smiled. The snow melted slow that spring, the kind of thaw that makes the earth sigh as it drinks the sun again. Streams came alive, whispering through the canyons, and the hills turned soft with green. Inside Eli Thompson's cabin, the fire burned smaller now, not out of need but habit, a quiet comfort rather than a fight for warmth. The two sisters, Tala and Neera, had brought something to that lonely ranch that Eli hadn't known he missed. Laughter. It started small, a quiet giggle between them when he tried to cook breakfast and burned the beans. A smile when he muttered about stubborn horses, but soon it filled the cabin like music. Every morning, Eli would rise before the sun, as he always had, to chop wood or mend the fence. But now he'd find Neera outside before him, wrapped in his old coat, her hands already full of kindling. "You wake the dawn," he told her once, and she laughed, her voice bright as water over stone. Tala, older and steadier, took to the housework with quiet strength. She spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. "You keep too much silence, Eli," she told him once, while washing clothes by the creek. Silence grows cold. He didn't know how to answer that. Maybe she was right. He had lived so long in the quiet that it had become part of him, like the scar on his hand or the limp in his step. Yet each day he found himself listening to their voices, the rhythm of their talk in Apache and broken English. He didn't always understand, but he didn't need to. The sound itself was enough to make the cabin feel like home again. As the snow vanished from the hills, they began to rebuild what winter had taken. Together, they fixed the barn roof, tended to the half-starved cattle, and cleared the fallen branches that had crushed Eli's fence. Neera teased him for being slow with the hammer. "Old man hands," she said, grinning, and he tried not to smile, though his cheeks burned. Tala would shake her head and scold her sister, but even she couldn't hide the small curve at the corner of her lips. Some nights, when the wind was calm and the stars came out sharp and close, Eli would sit outside by the corral, watching the sisters talk in low voices near the fire. Their faces glowed in the light, their laughter soft against the wide, empty sky, and he would feel something inside him ache, a kind of warmth and fear tangled together. He hadn't thought himself capable of such feelings again. His wife had been gone 20 years, buried on the ridge beyond the pines, and he'd made peace with that loss. But now, as he looked at Tala's steady gaze and Neera's fearless smile, peace was the last thing he felt. One evening, as the sky burned red with sunset, Neera came to him while he worked the forge. "You saved us," she said simply. Her eyes were bright, reflecting the glow of the fire. "Tala says the spirits sent you." Eli paused, the hammer still in his hand. "Spirits didn't have much to do with it," he said quietly. "Just did what any man would," Neera smiled faintly. "No," she said, "not any man." Before he could answer, she turned and walked back to the cabin, her long hair catching the light like black silk. Eli stood there for a long time, the metal cooling on the anvil, his heart unsteady in his chest. Days passed, and the bond between them grew. The sisters planted a small garden near the porch, coaxing life from the stubborn earth. They sang while they worked, soft songs Eli didn't know the meaning of, but he felt their hope in every note. And when he joined them for supper, the table no longer felt empty. It was strange, that feeling, as if the walls that had once closed him in now protected something fragile and beautiful. Then, one quiet evening, as the wind sighed through the pines and the fire burned low, Tala spoke. She sat across from Eli, her dark eyes steady. "We will not leave," she said softly. "You gave us life. We wish to give it back."